Okay, what we'll do is move on. We're going to show an interview that was done yesterday with Tony Farrell. Many people will know, Tony Farrell and a lady called Seven, a very brave lady, as you will see and hear. Tony Farrell, first of all, many of you will know as South Yorkshire Police. He was an intelligence analyst. And he eventually realised that material that he was being given to analyse in relation to terrorist threats simply did not stack up. And he then started a research for himself and came to the conclusion that we should be looking for the perpetrators of some terrorist threats at least, or terrorist attacks, as coming from within our own government and establishment. And of course, very quickly, he lost his job, and he's now been made an outlaw in some ways, except that many of his colleagues are now slowly but surely coming out of the woodwork to congratulate him on his bravery, and also to pass information to him and to take information from him. And I'll just say on that little point that this is something which is absolutely brilliant. We do have a great deal of good policemen and women who are starting to wake up to what's going on in this country, and they are coming forward to talk. And I know that many of them have and are giving help to Tony Farrell, and indeed the UK column. Now, the lady he's interviewing has got an incredible story to tell. It's about the theft of intellectual property. This lady came up with a range of ideas. She had some brilliant articles which appeared in the Vogue magazine, and then she started to look at programs which could really revitalise much of TV. One of the ideas that she had was Come Dancing. However, that material was stolen from her, and as you will hear in the interview, not only was the material stolen from her, she then was subjected to the most incredible journey through courts, where the courts found in her favour, but alongside it went incredible fraud, corruption and intimidation. And the interview has a real sting in the tail. Right, so Tony began, I know at the beginning the sound is a little bit, well, there's part of it missing because the sound was a little bit poor, but Tony starts off by asking Seven a little bit about herself.
My name is Charles Seven. I'm usually called Seven these days. My background is I'm a creative inventor and sort of conceptual designer.
Can we have a slide up, please, just to show that?
And yeah, I mean, my background has been media and entertainment, film, television, music, primarily film and TV, but also in the music industry as well. And yeah, that's my background.
Right, and what was the very gist of the story then, in terms of what's happened to you?
Well,
in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, I was targeted for my intellectual property. It began that way and morphed into an absolute nightmare, in short. And I developed a multimedia platform, and
that was stolen off you? It
was stolen by Helen Mary Alexander and a number of people within the entertainment industry. And simultaneously, it morphed into a sort of targeting operation, if you like, threats, etc., to prevent me from A, being paid, and B, taking any form of legal action to get any redress.
But you did take legal action, didn't you? Could we just have a couple of slides up? So you took this case on, didn't you, single-handedly?
Yes, I did. I sued. It was basically, I took emergency proceedings in 2004 because running up to me taking up proceedings, I was being literally terrorised for a very long time. After my works was stolen, the works were sold all over the world, and to prevent me doing anything about the fact that they were deals being done for large amounts of money. My whole life basically got taken over, if you like, in a very horrific way. Phones were tapped, computers were hacked. I was, you know, people were turning up at my house.
So massive intimidation.
Yes,
while
absolutely.
you took them through the court process.
Yes, and I took emergency proceedings on the 5th of August 2004.
Yeah. We can come back to the detail of, because what is an incredibly complex court process that you've undertaken.
Yes.
You know, we'll deal with that later. But as a result of taking them through the courts, the intimidation levels escalated to unbelievable levels.
Yes.
And you haven't had any particular help from the public authorities, have you?
No. Well, I mean, as I said, it's 10 years now, and it's still, it doesn't look like it's stopping anytime soon. Yeah, we took proceedings. I had 14 witnesses who also provided witness statements and gave exhibits of evidence, and against 10 individuals and corporations. Shall I read the names out?
Not just at the moment, because this is a massive case, and I want to first allow the viewers to get an understanding and an appreciation of just exactly what information was stolen from you.
Yes.
That's you show, you know, with your court bundles, isn't
yeah,
it?
that's my court bundles.
Single-handedly.
Yeah, basically myself and a number of witnesses, there were 14 witnesses in total. We produced evidence for a case which I won in 2006. It started off because, as I said, I created a multimedia platform.
So can we have the next slides?
And you'll see the shows.
You went through the judges.
Yeah, those are the judges.
What type of products, information was stolen from you? Can you
well, there are a number of shows. Some people might remember, well, lots of people will know Strictly Come Dancing, which is also Dancing on Ice, Dancing with Stars in the US. It's been sold all over the world, basically, in every other country. They've got different titles.
So you're saying you were the brains behind these programs?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know in terms of Strictly Come Dancing, how, you know, what's happened to that?
Well, it's become a household name, hasn't it? It's there's been a number of things that were done in the process, because this was running back to back with what I call, and it was a terror campaign, basically, in order to prevent me from taking any form of action. So as much as the shows, because of the popularity of the shows and the fact that the shows were very successful, they didn't want me to be identified as the person who was behind it. And there was intimidation in the sense that they were using the media to actually, if you like, to
taunt you?
To taunt me.
So there's an example. Can you explain what that is?
Well, that article, it actually says, has nobody at the BBC heard about killing the goose that lays the golden eggs? And the Strictly Come Dancing goose may not be dying yet, but she must be getting pretty knackered. Now, that was referred to in the court case with Judge Pumphrey, who's now deceased, but he actually at the time made reference to me being called a golden goose, because what actually happened was I created a multimedia platform, and this platform was converted into literally tons and tons of shows. Yes. And these shows were sold to all the different networks in the UK and around the world. Yeah. So we're talking not just about one production, but multitudes of productions.
And in that instance, in Strictly, BBC were the beneficiaries ultimately, but it also went around the globe, didn't it?
Yes,
in many nations.
It was sold all over the world.
This was worldwide success.
Absolutely.
And it's still going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, it wasn't just BBC that benefited from some of the products that were stolen, was it?
No, as I said, it was stolen by Helen Alexander, Jim Manson, Christopher Gossage was my solicitors, and we're going to go into that. But Tamsin Allen, this slide, I actually went to Tamsin Allen in 2004 to get legal representation when my work was stolen in 2003. documents were stolen by Helen Mary Alexander, and I went to see Tamsin Allen about representation, and she ended up stealing a disc that I had on me at the time, and that disc contained a script that I wrote which was called The Walk. Now I went to the solicitor to get help, and she actually steals the script, and then that gets sold to BBC and ITV, and basically again it morphs even bigger, and equally does the campaign to silence me.
Yeah, this was an ITV, The Walk in particular was a very popular ITV series.
Well, it was basically, I wrote a book called The Walk, which is basically based on a very true story of a very good friend of mine, Christine Agnew. And the concept was about giving up transportation. And this book was quite unique because it was a true story. And so when we actually saw that ITV had taken, from obviously Tamsin had gone to ITV with the script that she found on the disc. And from that point onwards, ITV, they didn't even bother to change the names. I mean, my friend is called Christine, and the character, they used exactly the same name, they used the same details. And one part of the script was sold to ITV, sorry, and the other part of it was actually the book was sold to BBC and turned into a campaign, and the rest of it was sold to the government, and they launched this whole campaign about giving up transportation, and it was called Britain on the Move. Mm-hmm. And a number of people wrote to the government, they wrote to the press, they wrote to the media about what was happening. And at that point, that's when it went stellar as far as the intimidation and threats. That's when it got out of control. So
we've had the BBC benefits in ITV,
yeah,
as well as going global. You've had Channel 4 programmes as well, haven't you? That
yeah.
That ended up on Channel 4 and stolen. Can you say something about that?
Okay, that slide relates to the BBC. My work, as I said, was sold partially to different networks. Now, the BBC ran a national competition which was called End of Story, Finish This. And they gave chapters of my book to famous authors, to Sue Tamsin, Faye Weldon, and all of these different authors had to actually convert parts of my book, and they gave the rest of the book to the public and called it Finish This. Right. And this was the kind of blatancy.
And they were purporting to have, these were their own stories that they were saying?
Well, actually, with Sue Tamsin, she said, she actually referenced, because they all took chapters, but when she wrote hers, she said, when the unnamed author of this story. So she clearly didn't want to be party to it. I mean, I don't know how much they were told, but we did ring up BBC, and they were laughing. Right. BBC staff were actually laughing when they knew that, when we called them and said, well, do you realise that this has been stolen by Tamsin Allen, and she's a lawyer and she's breached her position as a lawyer. They were just laughing on the other end of the phone. So that's the kind of deliberate and flagrant, abuse that was taking place. Okay, 10 years younger, that was sold to Channel 4 with, there's another show called You Are What You Eat. Mm-hmm. That show in particular it's very successful, another very successful show, and there's a whole stream, because the multimedia platform that I developed was to revolutionize the way entertainment deals with health and fitness, using dance, using, I just basically revamped the whole thing because I'd experienced the death of my brother, Daniel John Charles. And after experiencing the death of my brother, I realized that there was a window to create something with the entertainment industry to address very serious issues. And as I said, that's what initially got converted into lots and lots and lots of different shows back to back.
Okay. So in summary, you had well over 20 different products.
Yes.
Intellectual property that you went for copyright.
Yes.
And basically it all got conned, and before you knew it, it was all over the globe on mainstream TV stations.
Absolutely,
and you never got a penny for it.
No, absolutely, and even when I won, I still didn't get any costs or anything.
So what I want to move on is the next stage of this, and I'd like to examine Who were the con merchants that took this away from you?
If I can read in sequence.
Certainly, yes.
That slide that was just up, it's basically the program Hustle was depicting real events that took place and around the characters that are involved in my case, because the money involved in all this is massive.
And that was a BBC programme, wasn't it? The Hustle?
Yes, it was based on the people involved in my case, and if I can read them out, it's Christopher Gossage from Russell's. There's also a man called Tony English. And if we get that slide up again, the Hustle one, the one before.
The one before.
Now, each of those people are playing real life characters with real life events that were taking place, and this was synonymous of this case, because while real things were happening, they were scripting it and actually broadcasting and selling that as television shows. So we had Christopher Gossage, which is the younger man towards your left or my left. You know, I don't know how it's going to come out on the screen, but Christopher Gossage. Then you had Tony English, who's played by Robert Vaughan. Then you've got Richard Hanna, who's the black guy in the production. Clarion and NTL were involved. That's where the con took place. We've got the woman who's playing Helen Mary Alexander. She was the person that actually stole all my documents. And with someone called Jim Manson. They're from Scottish media groups. Now, Helen Mary Alexander used to work for BBC, and then she transferred to Scottish media groups. And so then you've got Tamsin Allen from Bindman and Partners. I don't know if you should have a slide of Tamsin. Okay. Yeah, that's Tamsin Allen, who you can see, and Jeffrey Bindman, and their firm is Bindman and Partners. And Derek Rosenblatt. There should be a photograph of him. He's Derek Rosenblatt of Ronald Fletcher and Co. And Christopher Vaughan of Cypress Film. I don't think we've got an actual image of him. But these were the primary people in the case. But because of the money involved, I mean, this is a criminal cartel. They operate from within mainstream media and the entertainment industry. And they wield a great deal of power because they are notorious. They steal people's intellectual property. I'm by no means the only case of this. I've had people writing to me since my case has gone up and become sort of more known. I get other victims that come to me and talk to me about what's going on in the industry. Yes. Yeah.
There were various stages in the collective con. Wasn't there? So can you just briefly go through what happened, very briefly, in terms of the stages? Well,
as I said, it began, I went to see Christopher Gossage about protecting these documents in 2003, and he tipped off the network that they had a golden goose who developed all these documents. And so a meeting was staged at NTL's facilities in November 2003 as well, November 2003, on the 11th of November, in fact. And NTL...
That was a weird meeting, that, wasn't it?
That was a bizarre meeting because NTL at the time had taken money, apparently they'd got a loan from the Japanese to set up these huge digital facilities in Feltham. And they were bidding for this Sky to do, I think it was to do with sports, to run all the sports for the UK, but Sky won the actual contract. And so they were left with these facilities without any money, and basically they were on the verge of bankruptcy. And I developed this concept, which was to deal with health, you know, to create a new genre, if you like, within the entertainment industry, looking at health. And when they realized that I'd developed this thing, they said about stealing the documents. But this wasn't just about stealing documents, there was a very sinister side to it as well. The initial email that you pulled up before actually makes a reference to murder, and he says, "On my command, unleash sales hell," which was
and who's he sending that email to? And who is that email?
Well, this is Richard Hanna. Richard Hanna was representing NTL and Clarion television at the time. And as I said, NTL were bankrupt. And so we got invited. I mean, he literally bombarded me because I had no interest in him. This was not me pitching my ideas, going out there. These people literally bombarded me. And I wasn't sure about going to the meeting, but I ended up, well, I had lawyers, so I thought, well, worst comes to the worst. If they try and steal anything, if they try and plagiarize my material, I'll go to my lawyers. But I didn't envisage the lawyers actually getting involved in this as well. So the lawyers and the networks, Helen Mary Alexander from Scottish Media Groups. Now, Scottish Media Groups are in affiliation with ITV, Granada, Grampian Television, and also Westminster.
And you immediately felt uneasy in that meeting, didn't you? Because Helen Mary Alexander, for instance, was talking about Ginger Productions and what she'd accomplished elsewhere. It made you feel distinctly uneasy.
Well, during the meeting, I was a bit surprised that she was sitting there and bragging about how she took down Chris Evans and how she stole all his formats. He had a couple of really big productions. I think one was something to do with, it was like a chat show which went out on Friday, TGI Fridays or something like that, TFI Fridays, something like that. And she was bragging in this meeting about how she took him down, basically, and stole all his formats. And so I was a little bit nervous about that, listening to this woman talk. But in the back of my mind, I came with a representative as well, who was a law graduate, who is a law graduate, Lisa Parnay. And she and I sat through this meeting, and in the back of my mind, because I had lawyers, I thought, well, you know, in the very least, if she tries to do anything, these lawyers are going to protect me. I had no idea that this would become a conspiracy to defraud and a conspiracy to murder, which is what it ended up being.
And who are the other characters? Let's move on. Have you got a slide of Jim Manson?
Yeah, Jim Manson, he actually accompanied Helen Alexander to the meeting. And he was instrumental in the conspiracy to convert the documents and sell them worldwide, basically. And not just that, to actually keep me terrorized. And he's one of the characters that is depicted in this program, Hustle. I think there were 5 central characters, and he's one of the people that's being depicted in that program.
And those characters were in the first tranche of the intellectual property theft.
Yeah.
What about the second one? Moving on to how the second spate of intellectual property theft happened.
Well, as I said, I went to visit Tamsin Allen from Byman and Partners, mainly because it says on their door that they deal with human rights, but nothing could be further from the truth. These people are very, very dangerous people.
And of course, what she stole from you was very personal. Now, at this time, your health suffered, didn't it? Around about this time.
Well, once my documents were stolen, I mean, as I said, I developed it because my brother, Daniel John Charles, had actually died at the age of 30. I was already in the entertainment industry, so I wanted to do something as a testament to his life. And so there was a great deal of research and a lot of time and energy that had gone into creating this. So when it got stolen and I saw my work literally plastered everywhere, I became immediately shocked. And the shock, I mean, was so tremendous, it had an impact on my health straight away. So, yeah.
And your medical records were stolen.
Yeah, in the
And I want to bring on the slide, have you got Derek Rosenblatt? So tell me about the role Derek Rosenblatt played with you.
Well, Derek Rosenblatt, again, I went to see Tamsin Allen first, and she basically stole my disc, and next thing I knew, my script was sold everywhere. And then I went to see Derek Rosenblatt as a last sort of, cry for help, if you like. Someone had said that he was their lawyer and I should go and see him. And when I went to see him, he was asking me for the evidence. He said, okay, I'll take on your case And but I need to see the master documents, because what was stolen was a part of a series of documents. At that point, Helen Alexander had stolen the first set of documents. And when I went to see Rosenblatt, he said, I need your masters, which had more information. So I go to see him and he steals those. Well, he basically starts trading them almost immediately. And in the course of this, that's when the death threats, excuse me, death threats went through the roof. I mean, literally, I started being stalked everywhere. I started being threatened. I saw that my house was under surveillance 24 hours. There was surveillance vans outside my house. There were men that were tailing me down the street, making slit your throat signs. So it became, as the sort of thefts, if you like, morphed, so did the kind of victimization.
And when you confronted Derek Rosenblatt about his antics, what kind of response did you get from him?
He was a very vulgar man. I mean, I don't even really want to repeat what some of the things he said, but he was extremely aggressive, and he was just a very, very aggressive man, and verbally very abusive about it. And he was basically laughing in my face. He knew that this massive, how can I say, this operation sort of, it's more like a criminal cartel, if you like. It was basically like organized crime cartel. And me appealing to him for help was like something that he found amusing.
And they even had the audacity, didn't they, to alter your, or put their sponsorship on your medical record.
Well, what happened with that was, as I issued proceedings in the courts, Royal Courts of Justice, Chancery Division, as the death threats got worse and worse and worse, and you know, I had men showing up at my house 3 times a day, and my house was broken into, locks were broken into, my home was bugged, all sorts of things were going on. It was basically crazy. And my doctors wrote to the courts and said, this woman is being literally abused, and we need you to stay the proceedings while she goes in and receives treatment. So I show up into hospital to receive treatment and find out that my medical records had been stolen. Now, in the course that my medical records were stolen, I was issued with a new appointment card, and you will see, if you have a look, you should have that as an exhibit. Derek, it says accident and emergency, but if you zoom into that, you can actually see that Derek Rosenblatt, who was my solicitor, is now featured on my new medical appointment card. And this was the kind of thing that was going on. It was very much, the abuse that was taking place was a sort of psychological operation as well. So they'd steal my medical records and then appear on my medical card. So basically, it was like rubbing it in your face. In fact, they actually even launched a pop band and called her Charlie 7, and they called the album for this band Charlie 7 Chasing Victory, a Not So Tragic Cover-Up. That's how blatant it was.
Right. That covers 9 of the defendants. What about the last one then, Christopher Vaughan? Do you want to say a few words about him?
Well, Christopher Vaughan was somebody that was working in the Royal Courts of Justice. Now, I tried to get legal representation, and this is very common in today's world, unfortunately. The Royal Courts of Justice has become synonymous with the word corruption. It's entirely corrupt. To get a solicitor to actually represent you in this day and age and be genuine is very, very, it's few and far between. Most solicitors are corrupt, and I was told very early onwards, because of the scale of the money involved in this, that the whole legal world had closed ranks on me. So I went to the Royal Courts of Justice and found Christopher Vaughan working there, and he said, I want to help you. And because by that time I had work stolen from Tamsin Allen, I'd had work stolen from Rosenblatt, I was desperate need of help, because this had gone, you know, this had become a whole nightmare, you know, it completely engulfed my life. And so when he offered to help me, I took a chance. there was information that was not on the disc that Tamsin stole. And he suggested that we could try to raise the money. We could actually try to use part of the script to pay for legal representation ourselves. And he ended up stealing it. I don't know what happened in terms of whether he tried to pursue helping me genuinely, and they actually said, look, you know, if you try and help her, we're going to do X, Y, and Z to you. I don't know if it was a case of that, or it was a case that he was always corrupt. I really don't know that.
What happened? What did he do to your material?
Well, that ended up becoming something which was called Walking Tall, and the main character was played by The Rock, Chris Rock.
Was that a TV program or what?
It was a feature film.
That was a feature film.
It became a feature film, and it was called Walking Tall. And again, it was basically rubbing it in my face. It was like, we're stealing from you and we're rubbing it in your face, and if you attempt to try and do anything about it, we'll kill you. Right. That's basically...
But I want to move on now, because you did attempt to do something about all of this, because
Absolutely.
You took an incredible case through the court process.
Yes.
And this case is a complicated case. I think we have a slide just to look at the roadmap. This case started 2003, 2004, and carried on until 2008. A very complex case. You can just pan in, and this is just a part of the various hearings that you have been to.
Yes.
In order to challenge the defendants, these 10 defendants. Now, do you want to say something about how this manifested itself?
Well, as you can see, the case was issued on the 5th of August. I took proceedings myself, because I was made aware that the whole legal world had closed ranks on me. I think because of, I spoke to one lawyer and he said, do you realise how much money is involved? There was various investors that had, big corporations that had put money into buying the rights of my work. So I was left faced with the situation of quickly studying law and actually taking the situation on myself.
And you did have a family with lawyers. You come from a background, didn't you? Your family are skilled in the area.
Yeah, I do actually. There are a number of barristers and people in my family.
But they couldn't operate on your behalf?
No, because it's a conflict of interest. You can't represent a relative. So I had to do it myself, and Lisa was a law graduate anyway, so I had lots of access to law books.
And this was the lady that accompanied you to the NTL premises initially?
Yeah, she actually was a witness and she co-signed. And she's also a very integral witness in the case, because in the course of all this, her phones were tapped and, you know, her communications were sabotaged as well. And still are communications between myself and hers. I can't send her emails and she can't receive emails from me. We can't basically communicate via email because our emails have been completely infiltrated. Okay. So in relation to the court process, it issued on the 5th of August 2004, and it should have been heard in July or August 2005. Because it had been stayed early 2005, in May actually of 2005, the case got stayed because doctors wrote to the courts and said, this woman is in a really bad way, we need you to stay proceedings. So,
yeah. But you'd already run part of this case by summary default by that time, hadn't you not?
Yes, because I issued proceedings, and various defendants, they didn't actually respond or acknowledge the claim. And
they were Richard Hanna, weren't they, in NTL?
Yes.
They failed to respond in the statutory amount of time required.
Yes. So if you've actually got a document there, I think, which should show that they produced no defence. That's the affidavit, but you should have a document which says no defence. Okay, you can see no defence received, no acknowledgement. Yeah. So by default, because if you issue a claim, you've got 28 days in order to either respond or counterclaim or defend it. and they did not acknowledge the claim at all. So what actually happened was I issued a summary default judgment, and only to find that court staff we noticed that they were destroying documents. So we issued the actual summary default judgment sometime in September, within probably a month or so after
2004.
2004, and after getting confirmation from the court that there was no acknowledgement, we returned back only to find a backdated kind of statement, which was still out of time. But this was typical of the kind of thing that
so this was really your first real experience of the court's skullduggery that was to follow.
Yes.
You know,
it absolutely got worse. I mean, as the time went on, it became more and more absolutely blatant that staff were being instructed to remove all evidence and traces of my case. Now, as I said, the case should have been heard in July of 2005, but there are a number of things that happened because this case is part of a wider significant events that took place. We're not going to go into it today, but basically at that time, I knew that my life was in a great deal of danger, so I had to go into hiding to prevent myself from being murdered, because I knew I was getting death threats, and I knew that it was very, very, very serious. So
you did not go outside, you were barricaded in your own apartment, really?
Yeah, for 3 months. I had to stay in hiding for 3 months. So I didn't get to court at the time that I was due to be in court. We tried to get help, witnesses tried to get help for me, but they couldn't. And so eventually I was smuggled to Notting Hill Gate police station, which is in London, at the end of August, 31st of August, in the late hours of the night, and eventually went back to court to find out what had happened to my case, only to find that a Judge Blackburn had removed it. He made no record that he removed it, he just removed it from the court lists. So I had to go to the Court of Appeal and basically find out what happened to my case. And I went before 2 lordships. I went before Chadwick and Sir Peter Gibson. The first hearing was on the 23rd of February 2006, where Chadwick actually ordered an investigation of what happened to my case. Now, during the period that I was in hiding, I had representatives go to court on my behalf and try and get injunctions for me so that I could leave my house safely. And they went before Blackburn. He refused to give me an injunction so that I could attend court safely. And as I said, in fact, what he did was he actually removed the case from the court altogether. And so Chadwick ordered to find out exactly what had gone on. Now, my representatives were ordered to write witness statements. And in these witness statements, they explained that when they went to the courts, there was court staff that said they would not be able to see a judge. They'd not be able to see anybody. They'd not be able to action any applications, because I had an official court order after the case being stayed. I had an order which basically gave me the right to relist the case when the medical treatment was completed. Unfortunately, because I was in hiding, none of that could actually happen. So my representatives went before Blackburn, and he ended up removing the case, as I said. And so when I went before Chadwick, he did this investigation and found out that the court staff were actually engaged in preventing the case from being heard before anyone.
And you've told me, just to give one example, you overheard the court listing staff speaking to each other in these kind of terms. Next time she comes in, keep her around.
Yeah.
It was as blatant as that to you, which you overheard and was meant to overheard.
Yes. Well, after I won in the Court of Appeal, there were 2 hearings before Chadwick. 23rd of February, and there was a conclusion on the 2nd of May 2006. And in the conclusion I won, it was in my favour, and I think you've put the document which shows that I won up on the screen. And the case was, from that point onwards, the case was to go back to the Chancery Division and be heard. But what happened was that when we got to the Chancery Division, court staff hid the evidence. There were 2 boxes of evidence, probably about 6, between, I think at that point, because it's morphed over the period of time, but there were 6 folder bundles. And court staff hid it within, there's a place called West Green within the Chancery Division. They hid the files, and by the time we got to court to a hearing, the judge received no evidence. So the case couldn't go ahead, basically, at that point. So repeatedly, I was experiencing court staff being engaged in preventing me from having my case heard.
But you got the case to what was a substantive three-day hearing, didn't you, in front of Judge Pumphrey in 2006?
Yeah.
Despite all these obstacles, you managed to survive and keep it on track against all these attempts to sort of derail the process. What happened in the Pumphrey hearing?
Well, I won, you know, when I got to Pumphrey's hearing, because it was supposed to be heard by Judge Warren on the 22nd of May after winning the appeal. No evidence was put before Warren, and the case was just removed from the lists again. So I had to go to the Judicial Complaints Office and various different departments before it was given to Pumphrey on the 12th of June. Got to court on the 12th of June, only to find that the evidence was held back from him. So he ordered the evidence to be brought before him and ordered a 3-day hearing, in which case he went extensively through the evidence, because these are serious allegations that I'm making. And none of the defendants turned up. Not one of them. I mean, if somebody so much as accused me of stealing a pen, I would defend myself if I know I didn't do it. But not one of them actually turned up in court. Anyway, he did a 3-day hearing, and
they did have a barrister in part, didn't they?
Yeah, absolute corrupt.
What was this barrister's name?
Brian Nicholson. Brian Nicholson was instructed to get rid of the case, by all costs. That was his real role. And the man is an out-and-out criminal. What he was doing was basically perverting justice by changing court orders, altering. Now, the document, you can see...
That's a picture of Brian Nicholson, the barrister for the defendants.
That's right. And the document that he's that we're showing here, it shows clearly it's his handwriting, and the Judge Warren had ordered for the case to be heard within 6 days, because we got to court and he hadn't been given one single page of evidence. And so when he realised, because I had duplicates with me, I showed him documents on the spot to show what had happened, that my life had been threatened, I'd been given death threats for my intellectual property. And he said it's in the interest of justice of this case being heard. So he ordered the case to come back before him in 6 days. But the barrister actually changed the order. He wrote it out himself, and he changed the dates to be 5 months later.
Yeah, in order to sort of completely derail the whole process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And from what you've told me about the 3-day substantive hearing in front of Judge Pumphrey, time and time again, Pumphrey was having to reprimand and even threaten him.
Yes.
Now, what did Pumphrey say about your evidence?
Well, he said it was the best case he'd ever seen in his career as a judge. I've got the audios, and if anybody wants to hear that, they can hear that. But he ruled in my favour. He could do no other. I mean, there were 14 witnesses, and there's a mountain of evidence, and I presented a cast iron case. There was absolutely no defence produced. They couldn't produce a defence because everything that I'd stated was factual. This barrister was arguing about his clients' reputations, that if all of this comes out, because of course these shows are all very, very well known, they're household productions now.
And these defendants being NTL and Scottish Media Group and Bindman's,
yes,
big players on the scene.
And NTL are now they're now Virgin Media. They actually disbanded because of this case. They actually, to hide, actually two of the companies, because Scottish Media Groups have now rebranded as Scottish TV, and NTL have rebranded as Virgin Media.
And as a result of what Pumphrey was saying, was this will we facing criminal proceedings against these 10?
Well, actually, Warren was even before Pumphrey, when he realised what was the skullduggery going on. He was he made it very, very clear that he was going to convict people for perjury and contempt of court, and all sorts of other things. Pumphrey the same. I mean, Pumphrey made it very clear that the case couldn't be struck out, because the barrister was saying, you've got to get rid of this case. My client's reputations will be ruined if this comes out. You've got to get rid of it. And he said, under no uncertain terms, there's absolutely no way that that's going to happen.
So you came out of that Pumphrey hearing knowing that you'd won?
Absolutely.
Knowing that you were going to get some kind of compensation, you didn't know how much at this stage.
Yeah.
And knowing that these defendants faced criminal proceedings.
Absolutely.
So what then happened?
Nicholson, he actually, and you've got a copy, he, I'm laughing about it, but it's actually not that funny at all what this man has done. He basically, he couldn't face the prospect of losing. So what he did was change the court document, the judgment and the order. That's a copy of the fraudulent order. And you can actually see where it's highlighted. It said, this is not taken from the official audios. It makes reference to that in the very first page because it was so blatant.
And also a judgment came out eventually. Now, that judgment is impossible to reconcile what was in the judgment with what had happened with Judge Pumphrey.
Well, as I said, I've got the audios, and the audios show that there was a completely different...
But you didn't... I mean, let's just dwell on the audios quickly, because you battled to get those audios for long enough, didn't you?
Well, as I said, I went before Pumphrey on the 12th of June 2006, and I had a 3-day hearing. I won the case in 2006, in June 2006, on the 14th. And what was to happen was the judgment was supposed to be handed down. But of course, Nicholson, whether he threatened the judge, we don't know what actually transpired. But the judgment actually didn't reflect what happened in the courtroom. It was completely, it's complete forgery. It took out all the witnesses, it took out all the evidence.
How did you get the audios eventually?
Well, it took another 2 years. To battle for the audios.
And Pumphrey had died unexpectedly in the meantime, and had been promoted prior to that.
Well, he was immediately earmarked for promotion. Yeah. From our position, it looked like he was threatened, or we can't say he was threatened, but basically he was pressurized to allow Nicholson. Nicholson was given control of the order. And he created this fictitious document, and then as far as we know, Pumphrey was to be promoted. And then in the process of us battling for the audios in 2007, we found out that Pumphrey actually was found dead in his apartment.
But you then got an order from Judge Warren to release the audios. You eventually got the audio tapes, and you managed to get another hearing in September 2008 in front of Lord Justice Lawrence Collins, didn't you?
That's right, yeah.
Now, what happened in that hearing, briefly?
Okay.
That's all important now.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a massive case, and it spans 10 years. It's difficult to cram into this medium, but just to summarise, Judge, we went before, well, I went back to court, and Chadwick had made an order to release the transcripts to get, in order to get the official sort of verdict of what happened in the courtroom. We battled for 2 years to get the audios, got the audios, and then went before Lord Justice Collins in 2008. Yes. And this man actually stood in front of us, and as I was reading out from the transcripts what was actually in the audio, because he wouldn't allow me to play the audios within the courtroom. Yes. And as I started reading out what Pumphrey had said and the real verdict, he stopped me and said, "This audio will never be played in a court, and I'm going to make an order." He basically stood in front of a courtroom full of people and made an order, stopped me mid-sentence, made an order so that the audios would never ever be heard again.
Right. And he subsequently dismissed the case. Now,
he buried the case.
The witnesses were all up in arms in this, and they all went to
we
the
reported him,
police station.
Myself and a number of witnesses, we reported him in the Strand police station.
I want to move on to the final thing. There are many dimensions to what's happened to you over the years, but the intimidation and the suspicious deaths that are involved around this case and the cover-up of it. Do you want to say a few words about that in the time we've got?
Well, some people might not be familiar with the term gang stalking or targeted individual. I'm what's called a targeted individual. As I said, I was targeted for my intellectual property. And in the course of how gang stalking takes place, you are selected and put on a program, and basically you experience harassment, death threats on a regular basis, break-ins. I've had my property broken into, I've had my property burgled. These are all because of these famous television shows.
And this isn't once or twice, is it? How many times have you had contact with the police, for instance?
I've been to the police about 65 times.
Mostly Metropolitan Police?
Yes, I have actually written to City of London Police as well.
And you're a chronic victimisation in terms of how many burglaries you've had this last year alone has been 6.
Yes.
Have they ever detected a single crime?
They don't want to. They change things. You've actually maybe have a copy of the crime file. There's a massive crime file around this case, and as I said, it's part of a wider. Yeah.
Who was responsible for that?
This is.
What is it as well? Covering up crime?
If you look, you'll see like patches all over the actual document, and there's some things that have been blanked out, names have been blanked out, and that was done by largely by Detective Stallard from Paddington Green Police Station.
Sergeant.
Yeah, Detective Sergeant Stallard.
Who was given the responsibility of investigating many of the crimes that you'd been reporting, and this spanned quite some period of time.
Yeah. And
continues to present. So you've had absolutely no help whatsoever. You've even had taunts, haven't you, from
Well, he threatened me to keep my mouth shut,
right.
Basically. This police officer called me up. The first time I was in hiding between June and August 2005.
Yeah.
He contacted me, and after I came out of the police station, I got a call on the 3rd, I believe it was on the 3rd of September 2005. And I don't even want to repeat the kind of aggression this man vented at me on the phone. But in short, he effectively was warning me to keep my mouth shut and telling me that nothing would ever be reported.
So your service from the police has been abysmal. What about NTL and the hacking? Because you've had witnesses that have all been hacked.
Yeah, all of my witnesses have been hacked, and it's interesting.
The calls have been rerouted. Their own calls have been rerouted to NTL. So this is over, and that's been witnessed before the court.
Yeah.
What about other agencies that you would have expected to help you in or protect you better? Well, you mentioned a few of those very briefly.
There's too many to mention, but basically when you have a case like this, there is a conspiracy of silence around it, and all the departments that are involved in protecting people are either paid to keep quiet, or they're made to keep the whole thing quiet. So it doesn't matter where you go officially to get help. You'll find that every door will be slammed in your face. And
so even do you want to name just a few? I know in terms of the time we've got, do you want to name just a couple? Just name them.
Well, CPS, Crown Prosecution Service, the IPCC. They were in
the Bar Council.
The Bar Council. The Bar Council offices were actually burgled. They contacted me and told me that the evidence was burgled from their, there was a burglary in their offices, and the evidence that I had produced about Nicholson was stolen from their offices. So that's typical of the kind of thing that goes on.
And this case, in the minute we've got left, we've had a few suspicious deaths. That strong inferences can be made that they're very sinister deaths. Do you want to say a few words about that in the remaining time before I summarise?
Well, there are a number of deaths associated with this case. As I said, there's a massive cover-up around it, state kind of cover-up, and a number of official things that have happened, historical things, have been, how can I say, without saying too much, there's not enough time to go into it at this particular time. But yes, there's been a number of suspicious deaths. There's Sarah Mulvey, and now Sarah Mulvey is a Channel 4 executive who was appointed.
She was the front for some of your work.
Yeah, she was the front. Her whole career was made on this stolen work, and she was found dead in her flat in 2010.
And you're a little bit suspicious about some personal friends that have been involved.
Yeah, and also there's Pumphrey as well, of course. Pumphrey was found dead in 2007 in his apartment.
Well, there is a report that's been commissioned. I've read this report, and what you've got, Seven, is an incredible case backed up with solid evidence and a court case that you've won twice over. But this is an incredible case of corruption. Thank you.
So welcome back to UK Column Live, and I've sat with the rest of you viewers watching that interview again, and can I say that both those two people, Seven and Tony Farrell, very, very brave individuals. They've both decided they're going to come out of the woodwork, as it were, to actually start to tell the truth about what's happening. And I'd just like to emphasise that Seven comes across as a very cool, calm lady, which in some ways, of course, she is. But she has endured the most extraordinary abuse, harassment and intimidation. She was locked in her apartment effectively for 3 months due to this, and it's taken her immense courage to come out and start to tell a small fraction of her story. And what we are really looking at is utter corruption at the highest levels of British society, utter corruption in the courts, cover-ups by the police, and it's only by people coming out and telling their stories to the wider public that we're actually going to be able to expose and deal with this. Now, I have some comments to add, but we should hopefully have Michael Docketty back online, and we should be able to continue the interview with him. Are you there, Michael?
Hello, Brian. How are you? Can you hear me okay this time?
You're a little bit weak. Let's see.
Can you hear me okay this time?
You're there.
Yes, Brian. Hello, I'm here.
He is fine.
All good?
Okay. I'm still having a little bit of difficulty hearing. It's very faint. Hold on a second. Do you want to just speak?
Hello, Brian.
That's much better. I don't know what happened there, but that's fine.
You look great in your civvies today.
In my civvies, okay, all right.
And I must say that Tony Farrell looks great in a suit. He's normally.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you for that. Well, were you able to actually see that interview yourself?
I was, and I know a little bit about Seven's story before because I know Tony Farrell very well, and I think for the viewers, I know Tony's been doing an awful lot of research for the last 3 or 4 months into that case, and in terms of credibility, Tony has a forensic ability to sort of dig into a case, and I think the Seven's case is quite extraordinary, and I think the work Tony's doing should be very much commended.
Well, I'd certainly agree with that. And the other thing I will just say, because I think it's a very, very important point, that we need to continually be saying thank you to particularly policemen and women who are also brave enough to start coming out and passing information and indeed helping with what's going on. And I know that in the background there is a very, very interesting team consisting of researchers, some retired police officers, some in fact retired forces people, but they are researching right around this case, and we can say that over the last month in particular some very interesting information is being forwarded, because it is quite clear that people inside not only the Metropolitan Police Service but other police services do not like what is being done in their name. So a big thank you to the policemen and women who are now starting to actually also speak out and fight this corruption. So over to you. Tell us a bit about yourself for viewers or listeners who don't know about you. You started to do that, but of course we had problems with the communication. So if you can just give us a rerun about yourself and what you've been up to.
Yeah, Brian, obviously the UK column touches an awful lot on paedophilia and the failure of certain organisations who should be protecting the public not doing proper investigations. And my story starts from back in 2008 when I discovered that my child, 13-year-old daughter, was being groomed over the internet. I reported it to the police. It seemed very quickly there was no investigation. And the next thing I found was I was being dawn raided by a section of the Metropolitan Police, battering rams and all, about 10 officers, dragged naked into the streets and in handcuffs. And that's the sort of the very nub and start of my story and the journey to try and achieve justice and bring some accountability to the people behind this.
No, go ahead.
So what happened, I was put on trial in 2009, and audio recordings demonstrated that the allegations that were being made against me were false. I was acquitted at trial. The matter went into the IPCC, the police watchdog here in the UK, and they decided after about a year to say everything was just simply a mistake. Everything's hunky-dory. And as the Seven story has sort of touched upon, you know, the organisations such as the IPCC, who should be helping the public, members of the public who face this type of conduct, they should be helping them, but they don't. It seems they cover up. I went on from there, and I was aware of the constitutional right of private criminal prosecution. It's our right as individuals in this country to petition the court, the criminal courts, and lay information into the courts. And that's exactly what I did. So back in April 2011, I started my first private criminal prosecution, and that case is still ongoing. And just like the Sevens case, you know, this is the same sort of pattern where individuals are trying to seek justice. The legal systems in this country drag it on and on and on. I hear that in the Sevens case there, it was from 2003. But I started that private criminal prosecution. I've no lawyers. I found them to be at the least unhelpful. And I decided I would do it myself. So I went into the courtroom arena, advocate for myself, and I would say I've done very, very successfully in the Crown Court here. And the first case is in the Crown Court in Luton. We've been through a number of hearings in it until such time as the Crown Prosecution Service decided to come along and try and get involved in that case and try and shut the case down. That particular case, which the defendant in it is the Borough Commander's Secretary, is now before the High Court in relation to the CPS's, the Crown Prosecution Service's, attempt to try and shut down that case. I have to say, as with all things, Brian, you've touched upon it, not all people are corrupt. And there are some very, very good people in the system, many who support me in the sidelines, who think what I'm doing is worthy. And without those people, I certainly wouldn't have got as far as I've got. And one of those people is the Crown Court judge at Luton, who refused to allow the CPS to shut the case down and give me the opportunity to go on to the High Court to challenge that decision. In the meantime, while I was waiting for the High Court decision, I started a private criminal prosecution of the police officers who led the raid to my home. That matter is before Southwark Crown Court, and there's a case management hearing in it this Friday at 10 a.m. in Southwark Crown Court. Do you want to jump in, Brian?
No, you're doing brilliantly. Keep going. This is absolutely lovely, concise and easy to listen to. Yeah.
Now, I can't talk about the those criminal cases in too much detail because, of course, they're before the courts, and the story of that will come out in good time. But we've had situations where the IPCC, in terms of they looked at the grooming investigation into my daughter, and they held, well, first off, a very good, decent woman within the IPCC held that the Metropolitan Police were negligent in that investigation. That's responsible. The unit that was responsible was the Sapphire Sexual Offences Unit. And I've obviously become to know that there are absolute rife problems with that organisation, the Sapphire Sexual Offences Unit, covering up rapes against women. There's a case of John Warboys, Kirk Reed. There's a recent case where a police officer within Sapphire was forging letters to victims of rape, telling them that the CPS wouldn't prosecute. And that's the sort of level of corruption that's going on within these organisations, failing victims, failing members of the public. But they upheld and said that the Metropolitan Police were negligent in that investigation, the very thing I was trying to address back in 2008. And what they then did, the IPCC, was to try and overrule that woman, that very experienced investigator, and they got a person from the IPCC up north called Rebecca Reed to overrule that, to say that the police investigation was done properly. You can read about that in an article in very aptly called Web of Lies in Private Eye, which was published in relation to that matter. But things have taken a bit of a twist. You might have heard, Brian, and it's now been commonly known as Stitch Up in Stevenage. Right.
Okay, and take us into that.
Because I'm happy to talk about it. It's not sub judice. I've been found guilty. You're talking to a recently convicted man. And the conviction that I have been, the badge that I've been given is assault court security.
Right.
And what happened is private criminal prosecutions, I really do believe it's a very, very effective way of holding the people to individual accountability, that they can't hide behind their sort of corporate shield or skirt. It's them on trial answering for their conduct. And I have started, there are a number of private criminal prosecutions in not all connected with my case, and I know there are a number of them starting all around the country, or if people have come aware of this constitutional right to privately prosecute. And a lot has been the publicity involved in my case. So I went to Cambridge Court, and I'll keep it nice and succinct. You'll have to tell me how much time we've got, Brian, because I'm
going to say 5 minutes, because that'll give me just a couple of minutes to sum up on a couple of issues. But keep going.
So what happened is I went up to Cambridge Magistrates Court back in August this year to lay a private criminal prosecution against an individual who has some connections with the Metropolitan Police. The allegation is that there has been fraudulent immigration into the country, which is another big problem. This individual has, it appears, forged documentation to be in the country, and the authorities are taking no action about it. Well, obviously, it's our right to we have the information, we laid that information. When I arrived at Cambridge, the situation got very bizarre, and I was simply asking, they told me I couldn't lay prosecutions in this court, and there I was exercising a constitutional right. I was polite, professional, and next thing I know, I'm being approached by security to manhandle me from the building. I said to these people, please leave me alone. I'm just here. I'm waiting to speak to the manager. Next thing I know, I'm being grabbed, by people, 3 security guards in the end, manhandle me from the building and throw me from a British court, which I think is quite outrageous. There was a police officer there. I called to him for assistance. He ignored me and just, as is too often the case, just sides with the other sort of officials. What transpired is I called the police that I wanted to make a report of an assault on myself. The police arrived. I went in to make myself known to a PCSO and asked for him to call the police. The next thing I know, I was standing quietly out of the way. I was actually on the phone to the to try and actually get access to the court. I was actually on the phone to the court. Next thing, the main protagonist comes back, a head of security called Nigel Carter, and once again, they all start grabbing me and manhandling me out of the court as a police officer, a PCSO, stands idly watching. I'm standing in the doorway of the court, and next thing I know, I'm being shoved violently in the chest by this head of security. Next thing I know, the police arrive. I'm being arrested for assaulting them. They accused me of, it started off raising a fist, changed to swinging an arm, and in court recently to throwing a straight right punch. So we've had a 3-day hearing just last week in Stevenage Magistrates Court, where at the end of the case, after I showed that there were 11 witnesses against me, I showed that each and every one of them was lying on oath, because just like the original case where I was put on prosecution by the Metropolitan Police, I had secretly audio recorded what happened in the court. And it showed that what was being said about me was completely untrue. They were claiming I was shouting at them, being abusive, and I think in the circumstances I acted absolutely normal, absolutely professional and calm. And the people who were being aggressive and abusive were the private court security from the organisation Mighty, who were ejecting a member of the public who was exercising a constitutional right from a British court of law. Yeah. So we had a really good attendance at the court hearing, about 10 to 15 people every day watching the court case progress. And quite outrageously, they refused to allow me to enter abusive process arguments in the case. There's CCTV gone missing, destroyed. The person who was handling it was the alleged victim in the case, the head of security at Cambridge. The police in Cambridge didn't collect CCTV from the street, which would have been decisive in the case. The case was extraordinary, and quite outrageously, all they wanted to do was get to the end and to find me guilty. And I think you'll find this interesting, Brian. Within 1 day of that judgment, the defence team for the police officers who are on trial at Southwark have made contact by letter to say that they want to introduce it as bad character evidence against me. Yeah.
Michael, thank you very much for giving us such a succinct summary of what's been happening to you. We are giving you an open invite to come and do a full interview and session with us on the programme, and we can really get into as much of this as you care to give us. So I hope you'll take us up on that. I'll just say very quickly, isn't it interesting, we're seeing this massive fraud and corruption running through the police and the courts. And of course, Ken Clarke, if he is successful in getting in these secret courts, this will increase, this behaviour will increase, because of course there will be nobody to watch these people and actually see what they're doing. A final comment from you. Where do you think this is leading?
Where's it leading to, Brian? Yeah. I think that, you know, the individual members of the public, it's very powerful when we stand up and we address these issues, and more people are doing it. I think there's so many things going on around the country that this really is coming to a head. Yeah. And I think that, you know, the more people that do it, you know, it is a dangerous thing to do. It does affect your life, as in the Severn case and the very many other cases. But if we don't stand up, then we leave these people to go on to abuse other people.
Absolutely. So
we've got to take responsibility and do it ourselves if we have to.
Lovely. Okay, thanks for that. A few final words here. I'm just going to end by putting up a picture of Severn just to remind us of what this who this lady is and what she's had to endure. This is not about race, this is not about religion, this is not about creed, this is not about are you an immigrant or not. This is about the fact that in Britain today, the state is criminal and corrupt, and if we don't deal with it, we are all going to end up in trouble. I'd just like to remind you that Seven made over 65 reports to the police. If we just have a very quick look at the police stations here, should come up on screen, hopefully. Coming up. So we've got Paddington, we've got Notting Hill, and we've got Marylebone Police Station, all of which she reported to. We're in the Met Police District overall. Who is the man in charge? Well, it's this gentleman, Sir Bernard Hogan Howe. This is the man ultimately responsible for the failure of his force to protect Seven, and the man ultimately responsible if she should be physically harmed or murdered as a result of the failure of the Metropolitan Police Service to protect her. If you're concerned about this lady, can we recommend that you speak to your local MP, councillors, police force, and in particular speak to the Metropolitan Police Service to ask very nicely and politely what they are going to do to bring Seven's case to court so the abusers, the intimidators, the fraudsters are brought to justice. Thank you very much for joining us. If you like what we do, please subscribe. Have a good evening. Thank you.